It is the spring of 1945, and the war in Europe is collapsing in on itself. The sound of artillery still echoes across shattered towns, but in the distance, the front lines are already dissolving. Somewhere between the ruins of Western Germany and the newly secured Allied rear zones, a group of German Red Cross nurses is being escorted under armed guard. Their uniforms are worn, their boots coated in dried mud and ash, their faces marked by months of exhaustion and uncertainty. These women were trained to heal German soldiers, to serve a Reich that is now crumbling hour by hour. They expect interrogation, confinement, perhaps even retribution. Instead, the trucks do not stop at a prison camp. They stop outside American military hospitals, hastily established in commandeered schools, convents, and civic buildings. Inside, the air smells of antiseptic and blood. Electric lights hum overhead, brighter than anything most of them have seen since the war began. The corridors are wide, orderly, and eerily quiet, except for the low groans of wounded men speaking English, French, and sometimes German. For the captured nurses, fear mixes with disbelief. They are prisoners, yes, but they are also medical professionals, standing at the threshold of an unfamiliar system of care. The Americans do not shout. They do not strike. They issue instructions calmly, efficiently, almost clinically. Charts are handed over. Supplies are stacked neatly. The nurses realize something unsettling. They are not being punished. They are being used. As they step inside, guarded but not restrained, the war they thought they understood slips away, replaced by a reality they were never prepared to face. The first days inside U.S. medical wards unfold with a quiet intensity that none of the captured German nurses had anticipated. From the moment they step through the guarded entrances, the contrast with everything they have known during the war strikes them, almost physically. The buildings themselves feel alien. Former schools, civic halls, and religious institutions transformed into orderly hospitals. Floors are scrubbed clean, walls freshly painted, windows intact. There is no echo of bombing here, no distant thunder of artillery. Instead, there is a constant low hums, generators running, boots moving briskly down corridors, the measured cadence of medical voices calling instructions. For nurses who have spent years working under shattered roofs and flickering candlelight, this controlled environment feels unreal, almost staged, as if they have stepped into a parallel version of the same war. They are processed quickly, but without cruelty. Names are taken, ranks noted, Red Cross credentials examined. Armed guards remain present, yet their weapons stay lowered, more symbolic than threatening. The nurses expect interrogation rooms, shouted accusations, perhaps retaliation for the uniform they wear. What they receive instead is assignment. Clipboards are pressed into hands. Armbands are adjusted. They are directed toward wards already filled with wounded bodies. The message is unmistakable. Whatever they were yesterday, today they are needed for work. As they enter the wards, their senses are overwhelmed. The smell is the first shock, sharp antiseptic mixed with blood and burned flesh. A scent far stronger and cleaner than the sour stench of decay they knew from overcrowded German field hospitals. Stainless steel instruments gleam beneath electric lights that never dim. There are no frantic shortages here. Bandages are stacked in abundance. Syringes are unpacked from sealed containers. Morphine is logged carefully, not hoarded or hidden for emergencies that may never come. Blood plasma arrives in labeled crates, cooled and organized, delivered with a reliability that feels almost obscene after years of improvisation and rationing. The nurses exchange glances as they take this in. Some feel relief, Others feel a sharp sting of resentment, wondering how such resources could exist while they had watched soldiers bleed to death for lack of basic supplies. Training takes over quickly. Hands that once shook with fear now move automatically, cleaning wounds, holding instruments, assisting in procedures. They work alongside American doctors who speak calmly, sometimes sternly, but never with contempt. Orders are given clearly. Mistakes are corrected without shouting. In many cases, language becomes secondary to motion. A nod, a pointed finger, a shared understanding born of medical necessity. The patients themselves deepen the disorientation. American soldiers lie on the beds, the young faces pale beneath bandages, their accents foreign but their suffering unmistakably familiar. Nearby, Allied troops from other nations rest in the same wards. In some cases, wounded German prisoners occupy beds only a few meters away, their uniforms cut open, their insignia removed, their injuries treated with the same urgency. The nurses notice this immediately. There is no segregation by allegiance in pain. The realization unsettles them. They had been taught that the enemy was ruthless, vengeful, incapable of mercy. Yet here mercy appears standardized, institutional, woven into routine. At night, exhaustion sets in. Shifts are long but structured, unlike the endless stretches they once endured under bombardment. When they are dismissed, the nurses are escorted to temporary quarters. Clean rooms with real beds, blankets without lice, running water. The silence feels oppressive. Some lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in their minds. Others cry quietly, not from physical mistreatment, but from the emotional shock of safety. Safety feels undeserved. It feels dangerous. A few whisper prayers. Others remain silent, afraid that acknowledging relief might betray the dead they left behind. Fear never fully leaves them. They are still prisoners. Guards still count heads. The passes are restricted. Letters are censored. Yet the absence of overt brutality creates a different kind of tension. They wonder what is expected of them in return. Gratitude, compliance, silence. The uncertainty gnaws at them. They watch the Americans closely, searching for signs of hidden cruelty, of delayed punishment. Instead, they find routine. Shift changes, coffee breaks, laughter in low voices near supply rooms. Life continuing in a way the war had denied them for years. Slowly, almost against their will, respect begins to form, not ideological, not political, but professional. The efficiency of the system is undeniable. The coordination between doctors, nurses and orderlies is precise. Charts are updated meticulously. Infection control is enforced strictly. The German nurses recognize techniques they have only read about, procedures they never had the equipment to perform. They learn by observing, absorbing knowledge even as they struggle with the implications of where it comes from. Still, guilt shadows every moment. When an American soldier thanks them weakly in broken German, some nurses cannot meet his eyes. When a wounded German prisoner survives because of resources once denied to them, relief mixes with bitterness. They feel suspended between worlds, no longer fully aligned with the regime that sent them to war, yet not free of responsibility for the uniform they wore. Each bandage they apply feels like both redemption and accusation. By the end of those first days, one truth becomes impossible to ignore: captivity has not stripped them of their identity as nurses. Instead, it has forced that identity into the open, away from ideology and command. Here inside US medical wards, they are judged not by slogans or salutes, but by steady hands, calm judgment, and the ability to keep someone alive. That realization lingers heavily as they walk back down the bright corridors. boots echoing softly, knowing that whatever happens next, the war they thought they understood has already changed forever. As the days turn into weeks, the captured German nurses begin to sense a deeper shift taking place, one that goes beyond the shock of material abundance and orderly procedure. The initial disbelief fades, replaced by something far more unsettling, a moral tension that follows them through every corridor and into every ward. They start to notice patterns, small but consistent, that challenge everything they were taught to expect from the enemy. Wounded men are not sorted by uniform or allegiance, but by urgency. A bleeding Allied soldier is treated beside a German prisoner without hesitation, their beds separated only by thin curtains. Pain, not politics, dictates priority. For nurses shaped by years of propaganda and rigid hierarchy, this quiet impartiality feels almost subversive. The realization does not arrive all at once. It creeps in during routine tasks. The way an American doctor leans over a German POW with the same concentration he gives to his own men. The way a nurse adjusts a blanket around a shivering enemy without being told to do so. The German nurses watch these moments closely, waiting for exceptions that never come. There are no whispered insults, no deliberate delays in treatment. The rules appear absolute. To some of the nurses, this is comforting. To others, it is deeply disturbing. If the enemy is capable of this, then what does that say about the war they have been serving? Interactions that once felt unthinkable begin to occur naturally. An American nurse hands over a cup of coffee during a brief pause between admissions. The taste is unfamiliar, bitter but warm, and it carries with it an unspoken gesture of normalcy. Short conversations follow, careful at first, fragmented by language barriers, but gradually more fluid. Medical terminology becomes a shared bridge. Words like infection, pulse, and hemorrhage cross linguistic lines with ease. In these exchanges, rank and nationality fade, replaced by the shared exhaustion of caregivers surrounded by suffering. The guards remain present, a reminder that trust has limits, yet even they soften at the edges. Some recognize that these women are not combatants, but nurses who have seen more death than most soldiers. A cigarette is offered in silence. A warning is given quietly instead of shouted. These moments do not erase captivity, but they humanize it. For the German nurses, this is perhaps the most destabilizing aspect of all. They had prepared themselves to endure cruelty. They had not prepared to be treated with measured fairness. At the same time, news from outside the hospital walls begins to seep in, carried by rumors, overheard conversations and censored letters from home. Cities are destroyed. Families are displaced. The Reich is collapsing in ways no one can deny anymore. The nurses listen without comment, absorbing each fragment of information with a growing sense of dread. Some cling to denial. Others feel a slow, aching shame. The hospital, once a refuge from the chaos of war, becomes a place of confrontation, not with the enemy, but with the truth. The Americans do not shield them from these revelations, nor do they weaponize them. There are no lectures, no forced confessions. Instead, facts circulate organically, as if the weight of reality is considered punishment enough. The nurses feel the ground shifting beneath them. Ideals that once felt immovable now appear fragile, constructed, vulnerable to collapse under scrutiny. The discipline that carried them through years of service begins to fracture, replaced by questions they can no longer silence. Work continues relentlessly. Convoys arrive with fresh casualties from the final offensives. Limbs are amputated. Shrapnel is removed. Infections are fought aggressively, often successfully. The German nurses witness survival rates that astonish them. Men who would have died in their former hospitals now live, not because they are braver or stronger, but because resources and organization have aligned in their favor. This realization cuts deeply. It forces them to confront the cost of inefficiency, of ideology interfering with care. Gradually, the nurses themselves change. They adopt American procedures without being instructed to do so. They adjust their pace, their expectations, their understanding of what is possible in wartime medicine. Some begin teaching younger American orderlies techniques learned under fire on the Eastern Front. Improvisational skills born of necessity, now repurposed in cleaner, safer environments. These exchanges feel surreal, knowledge forged in desperation crossing enemy lines in moments of quiet cooperation. Despite this growing integration, isolation remains. When shifts end, the nurses retreat into themselves. They think of the wounded they treated who did not survive. They think of those who did. They wonder where those men will go, what they will remember, and whether anyone will remember them in return. Letters from home are reread until the paper softens at the folds. Names of missing relatives are whispered in the dark. The hospital, for all its order, cannot protect them from grief. Some nurses begin to feel an unfamiliar emotion. Anger not directed outward, but inward. Anger at having been missiled. Anger at the years spent believing in absolutes that now seem grotesquely simple. This anger does not erupt loudly. It settles heavily, manifesting as silence, as distance, as a refusal to participate in conversations about the future. Others respond differently. They lean into their work with renewed intensity, as if excellence might offer some form of absolution. The Americans notice these shifts but rarely comment on them. They allow the German nurses their space, their dignity, their quiet reckoning. This restraint speaks volumes. It suggests a confidence not rooted in dominance but in outcome, a belief that exposure to reality will do what force cannot. For the nurses, this realization is profound. It reframes power not as something imposed, but as something demonstrated. By the time weeks have passed, the hospital has become more than a place of treatment. It is a crossroads where past beliefs collide with present evidence. The German nurses walk its corridors carrying invisible burdens heavier than any medical kit. They are no longer simply prisoners of war. They are witnesses to an alternative way of waging conflict, one where humanity survives even amid destruction. That awareness does not free them, but it reshapes them irrevocably, preparing them for a future they cannot yet imagine, but can no longer deny is coming. By the time summer settles over Europe in 1945, the hospitals begin to feel different, as if the air itself has changed. The war that once dictated every movement, every admission, every emergency surgery is now officially over. Yet its presence lingers in the bodies that still fill the wards. Wounded men continue to arrive, not from active fronts, but from the aftermath. Accidents, delayed evacuations, infections that refuse to heal in time. For the captured German nurses, the end of the war does not arrive as a celebration. It arrives quietly, almost cautiously, announced through paperwork, altered guard routines, and conversations spoken in lower, steadier voices. Orders change. Some nurses are informed they will soon be released. Others are told they will be transferred to displaced persons facilities, refugee hospitals, or civilian medical centers overwhelmed by the collapse of infrastructure. A few are asked, not commanded, to remain temporarily due to severe staff shortages. The choice itself feels surreal. After years of obedience enforced by authority, Being asked rather than ordered leaves them disoriented. Some accept out of professional duty. Others decline, too exhausted to give any more of themselves. No one is punished for refusing. That, too, leaves a mark. As departures begin, the hospital corridors fill with a strange mix of relief and grief. Nurses pack small bundles of belongings. Folded uniforms, letters, a photograph saved against all odds. They walk past wards, where men they once cared for now sit upright, learning to walk again, preparing to return home. Some patients recognize them and nod quietly. A few attempt awkward words of thanks. These moments are brief, restrained, but heavy with meaning. There are no dramatic goodbyes. War has taught everyone how fragile attachment can be. For those who leave, stepping outside the hospital feels like crossing an invisible boundary. The world beyond the gates is damaged, uncertain, stripped of clear direction. Cities lie in ruins. Railways barely function. Entire populations are displaced, moving without maps or guarantees. The nurses realized that the hospital had been a strange sanctuary. Not because it erased suffering, but because it gave suffering structure, purpose, and response. Outside, chaos reigns again. Those who remain a little longer feel the wards slowly empty. Beds that once held groaning bodies are now neatly made, untouched. Operating rooms fall silent for hours at a time. Supplies are inventoried instead of consumed. Sunlight pours through windows that once remained shuttered, revealing dust motes drifting lazily through the air. The quiet is unsettling. Without constant urgency, memories rush in uninvited. Faces of patients who did not survive resurface vividly. The nurses remember the feel of cooling skin beneath their hands, the precise moment when hope slipped away. In the stillness, there is no distraction from reflection. News from the outside world grows heavier. Reports of liberated concentration camps circulate with undeniable clarity. Photographs appear. Testimonies are whispered, then spoken aloud. The nurses listen, some in disbelief, others in silent recognition of truths they had sensed but never confronted directly. No one forces them to respond. No one demands confessions. Yet the weight of knowledge presses down relentlessly. For many, this is the true climax of their captivity, not imprisonment, not labor, but the confrontation with moral consequence. Inside the hospital, reactions vary. Some nurses withdraw emotionally, performing tasks with mechanical precision while retreating inward. Others struggle openly, breaking down in private rooms, overwhelmed by grief, shame, and helplessness. A few seek conversation with American staff, asking questions they once would have avoided. These discussions are cautious, imperfect, but sincere. There is no absolution offered, only acknowledgement that history cannot be undone, only carried forward. The Americans, too, are changing. Victory does not bring triumph here. It brings exhaustion and responsibility. Doctors prepare to return home or redeploy. Nurses worry about reintegration into civilian life after witnessing so much damage. In this shared fatigue, national divisions soften further. What remains is mutual recognition. Everyone here has been shaped irreversibly by the war. When the final German nurses are released, there are no ceremonies. Paperwork is signed. Instructions are given. A guard opens a gate that no longer feels symbolic of power, but of transition. As the nurses step away, some pause instinctively, turning back to look at the building one last time. Within those walls, they were prisoners. They were caregivers. They were witnesses to an unfamiliar version of authority, one that did not demand loyalty, only competence and humanity. Years later, many of these women will rarely speak of their time in American hospitals. not because it was the most traumatic chapter of their lives, but because it is the most complicated. It does not fit easily into narratives of victimhood or guilt. Instead, it occupies a space in between, a reminder that even in total war, choices existed, systems mattered, and individuals could act with restraint. Some will carry this experience into post-war medical careers, advocating for standardized care, ethical treatment of patients, and professional independence from ideology. Others will retreat from medicine entirely, unable to reconcile healing with the memories attached to it. All of them, however, will carry the same quiet knowledge that in the final days of a brutal conflict, they encountered compassion where they had been taught to expect vengeance. In the end, the hospital does not represent forgiveness nor condemnation. It represents something more unsettling, proof that humanity can survive even inside systems designed for destruction. For the captured German nurses, that realization becomes both a burden and a guide, shaping how they remember the war and how they choose to live after it is over.